I'm Mary Beth Seawald, President and CEO of the Vegas Chamber, and we are honored today to be at our nation's capital with the largest delegation ever coming to DC with the Vegas Chamber. I'm here today with Congresswoman Susie Lee. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be here. It's great to be here with all the members of the Chamber. You have been an incredible advocate for businesses in our business community. So it's always good to see Las Vegas in Washington.
That's right. And we feel like we've just about brought all of Nevada to DC.
I know, right? Largest ever.
It is.
It tells you're doing something right. And I think it's really important that our business community makes sure we understand what's happening on the ground. We can't fight for them unless we know. So I think this is such an important time for you all to be here.
Well, thank you. We feel that way as well, and we appreciate your tireless advocacy for the state. I know that you've addressed our delegation, and let's just go ahead and start with what were some of the things that were on the top of their mind and messages that you shared with them today?
Yeah, obviously we talked about the journey we've all been on together with the pandemic and its impact it's had on our community. Kudos to the chamber for, I can't even tell you how many Zoom calls we did together and town halls we had, making sure that people understood how they could get the resources that we fought for to keep businesses afloat, to keep employees employed. But more importantly, I always say Las Vegas was ground zero for the pandemic and economic devastation, but we're now ground zero for a lot of the economic opportunity. The bipartisan infrastructure package that will get, incredible investments in our infrastructure into Nevada. I say we're in the business of importing tourists, so we need to be able to make sure our infrastructure can get them to and from Las Vegas. To making sure to investing in the CHIPS Act, which is all that innovation, money for science and innovative research. Nevada has generally been left out, an underserved area when it comes to that. And through a provision I included in that bill, we're going to see between $7 and $11 million of funding come to our state for that type of research. So, continuing to make sure, I always say one of my goals when I was elected was to make sure that the money we send here gets reinvested back in Las Vegas. And I know that the chamber has been an incredible advocate for that. But, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, that's been important. Other issues we talked about, obviously, water is top of mind with everyone as we look to economic development in our community, making sure we have enough water. And, I talked about my large-scale water recycling bill that was included in the infrastructure package. But it's not just that bill. I think Southern Nevada Water Authority has led the way, number one, in conservation, in recycling and reuse. But also in building these types of innovative partnerships so that this is a partnership between LA and Las Vegas, where LA will recycle the water and we'll keep it in Lake Mead. So there's no building of pipelines. It's really just smart investment and smart partnerships. And so, but we have so much more to do in terms of workforce development, housing, and healthcare.
You bring up so many of the topics that are critical to Southern Nevada. Water is huge, and the chamber has been working on all of those. And so I'd like to drill down just a little bit more on the CHIPS Act. That is one thing that is very near and dear to your heart. What are some of the provisions specifically of that bill? You talked a little bit about the dollars that are actually going to come back home to us in Nevada. What are just a couple of those provisions that we should know about?
Well, I think the most important provision, when you think about chip manufacturing, and we're all dealing with inflation and the impact of the economic disruption of COVID, supply chain disruption, it sort of ripped the Band-Aid off of manufacturing in our country. And we need to bring manufacturing back to America. And that's a major part of the CHIPS bill, but also bringing semiconductor manufacturing back to our country. I'm sure you hear it from businesses, whether you're building slot machines to build, to telephones, to whatever, cars, our car dealers, it impacts every sector. And we rely too heavily on foreign manufacturing of chips. And so that's a key investment, not just to, make sure we deal with the supply chain, but bring costs down. And as I said, the National Science Foundation doles out plenty of money in terms of science, research, and innovation. And underserved areas like Southern Nevada miss out a lot of times on that type of funding. And why that funding is so important is because economic development and diversification comes through research and innovation. And that comes through our university system and Desert Research Institute. And so making sure that we are identified as an underserved area, we will now be able to get between $7 and $11 million in that funding into our state. It's not just having that funding, it's the research that it's supporting could support our next new sector or business sector that we then bring to Southern Nevada to diversify our economy.
Exactly. So having said all that, what would be some of your priorities for the coming months and year for next year?
Coming months and years, listen, I mean, first and foremost is making sure we're doing everything we can to bring down costs for businesses and for families. We just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which does a lot around Medicare. We passed several bills that I don't think will get taken up in the House, taking on gas price gouging, lowering food and fuel costs, but making sure we're doing everything to shore up our supply chain, to, invest in, like we did in our infrastructure, but get that money working. We can pass all the bills we want, but making sure that money gets out into our community and gets to work, to me, is really the next. Issues that are important to me is workforce development. I hear from businesses every single day, they just can't find enough workforce. I introduced a bill along with Jackie Rosen to support sector partnerships, which are workforce development programs that pair businesses with universities and nonprofits, because as we know, many of the jobs of the future aren't going to require a 4-year degree, that we can do these types of internship programs and get people trained and get them into the workforce. And then, of course, housing and healthcare. We're in a crisis in terms of availability in both of those in Southern Nevada. So continuing to make sure we get our residency slots, we're bringing more doctors and nurses. I got community project funding for Nevada State College so that they could beef up their nursing training program, but also bringing down the cost of housing. I mean, you can't import work, you can't attract workers if they can't afford to live in our community. That's going to be, those are my important issues, as well as our water crisis as well.
And those are all the same issues that we're working on at the Vegas Chamber as well. So we appreciate your efforts and your advocacy toward all of those things on behalf of the entire state of Nevada. Just last question, to switch gears just a little bit. How would you describe the current mood in Washington, D.C.? I know.
48 days before the election?
Yeah.
We've come through an incredible period, obviously, of threats to our democracy. And I don't think that should be, I don't think it could be overstated, just what's at stake in terms of making sure that we are securing our systems, to prevent what was attempted on January 6th from actually happening, which was disrupting our elections. But also, when you think of that, but also we passed the infrastructure bill, we passed the PACT Act for our veterans, the CHIPS and Research Act for bringing manufacturing to our country. We even got some bipartisan support on the Safer Communities Act, gun safety legislation. So while, the media likes to say how divisive we are, I think this has been a period of us trying to roll up our sleeves and work together. Not to say that there isn't, serious partisanship happening, especially at this time of year. I think that, coming out of this pandemic, just understanding what was at stake and what we lost and almost lost, realizing that we have to come together and pass bipartisan legislation. We can't run a country where you depend on, having full control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and then 4 years later trying to reverse that and reverse everything that just happened. It's not good for our country, and it's not good for the American people.
Well, Congresswoman Susie Lee, on behalf of all of us at the Vegas Chamber, our Board of Trustees, and the team, thank you so much for being such a staunch advocate for our state.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
All right. I'm Mary Beth Seawald.